of India will commence. I now therefore request Honorable Chief Justice Hemant Gokhale and Honorable Chief Justice Mohit Shah to unveil the portrait, and all the dignitaries on the dais may accompany them. Thank you, everyone. I would like to invite Honorable Justice Dr. D.Y. Chandrchud,
Judge of the Supreme Court of India, my Lord Justice Mohit Shah, the Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court, my very learned and distinguished colleagues, Shri Dilip Karni and Shri Madan Doshi, Shri Sardesai, our very good friend Shri Harshat Timbalkar, Shri Milind Pawar, all the other members of the Pune Bar Association, the members of the family, friends who have come from near and far, distinguished members of the bar, ladies and gentlemen. I must begin by expressing my very deep sense of gratitude on behalf of the members of our family and the friends of my father, to all the members of the Pune Bar Association, to Shri Justice Madan Doshi, who was then the district judge, for taking all the trouble that you have in recognizing and paying tribute to the memory of my father. Honestly, I don't think that I stand before you as a judge of the Bombay High Court. Just a few months before my father died, somebody called up at my residence and asked at about 7:30 in the morning, may I speak to Justice Chandrchud? I responded to him immediately by saying that you've got the wrong number. His telephone number is 22042474, that was my father's number. That person said, no, but I recognize your voice, I want to speak to Justice Dhanjay Chandrchud. But you know, it was so ingrained in me that there was only one judge in the family and only one Justice Chandrchud, that I think I can really be only a very remote and indistinguishable understudy. But I feel blessed to be his son. I feel blessed to have been able to bask in his presence. And I indeed feel blessed today by the fact that all of you have paid tribute to his memory. I'm deeply grateful to Honorable Justice Gokhale, Shri Justice Hemant Lakshman Gokhale, for having come all the way despite his preoccupations. He has travelled from Cochin, he has to go back to Delhi tomorrow to a pile of work which awaits him. But I feel that we had a rightful entitlement on his Lordship's time. Because Justice Gokhale's father and my father sat together in an association which no other association can ever emulate. They were both members of the youngest class in the Nutan Marathi Vidyalaya in 1924. And it was an association which thereafter continued. Their careers took different paths, but their friendship never took a different path. The friendship really went only one path, and that was a path of very close association. So we are deeply obliged to Justice Gokhale for being here. My Lord the Chief Justice had to be in Nagpur today for a different function, and he very graciously agreed requested him. He was busy with his own son's wedding, and he gave me the first available date in his calendar to be here. About a week before my father passed away, there was a mediation awareness program conducted by the Bombay High Court, when Chief Justice Mohit Shah made a very elaborate and distinguished presentation, a PowerPoint presentation on the benefits of mediation. My father, at the age of 87 years and 360 days, sat through the entire program and heard the brilliant exposition by my Lord the Chief Justice. When I went home in the evening, he said, "Don't you believe that at 87 I went to sleep after lunch? I can explain to you what mediation is all about, and I am now convinced about the benefits of mediation." He never lost his zest for life. Justice Dilip Karnik, who is present here, who is your own Justice Dilip Karnik. Justice Dilip Karnik, his father and my father shared an abiding friendship. Nana said to my father was a piece of his heart. They had grown up together, and my father was deeply respectful of the learning, of the erudition of Justice Karnik's father. You know, later on in life, my father and I, we were always friends. I don't think I shared a relationship of a father and son as much as of a friend with my father. And towards the end of his life, he would always tell me that the great sadness I feel about life is that all your contemporaries, one by one, pass away and you feel very lonely. And this sadness at the passing away of some of the stalwarts of our bar is something which we all, as members of the human race, have to bear with. Today we meet with a sad thought that a very distinguished member of our bar who was closely associated with my father, Vijay Rao Mohite, is no longer with us. I wish he was here this morning because he would have shared in our joy. He would have shared in our pleasure. But then there are so many wishes in life which you feel could have been better realized. But then the cycle of life has to go on. My father belonged to Pune. His heart was in Pune. And every minute of his life, every minute of his existence, his mind, his heart, his thoughts dwelt on his years that he spent in Pune. He lost his mother very early, and when he referred to his mother, he would always say, "This is the mother I never met." And he would smile when he said that. He was brought up by a very distinguished member of our family, Baba Sahib, Adv Chandrchud, who was a leading lawyer there. And perhaps in our family, joint family house in Pune, he learned the first few steps of equity and of Article 14 in its most fundamental sense. There were about 8 or 9 young men, young children, boys and girls, all of whom in those days, because of the vagaries of life, had either no father or no mother. And they were all brought up by Baba Sahib. And my father used to tell me that he would take all the girls to one shop and say that all the girls should have one dress made from the same material, because there was no distinction about whose child that girl was. And he would take all the young boys to one shop and say that please make them the same jabba and please make them say the same pajama. So these were the basic learning blocks of his life. The learning blocks where he learned that all people are equal. It was as a protege of Baba Sahib that he developed a love for learning, for literature, for sport, for music, for discipline, and for ethical living. Baba Sahib used to engage some of the finest teachers to come and teach the girls of our house English when women's education was still to be an established reality. And the young girls in the family would be taught the poems of Shelley and Wordsworth. When one of my father's cousins lost her husband early, Baba Sahib was the person who said in those days that she has to remarry. So he lived by precept. Several cousins grew up together in the joint family house. We were a landed family, but we lost everything. And particularly when the agricultural land ceding laws came into force, there was nothing left for the family except perhaps the use of the brain. The women in the family mortgaged the gold and the silver, as all landed families then used to have, so that two sons of the family could go and travel and study medicine in the UK. And that is how our family got the first FRCS in the family and the first MRCP in the family. Such was the degree of commitment of the members of our family, including the women in the family who really contributed to being where we are. My father joined the Mumbai Elphinstone College. He was sent because he was the bright star to Elphinstone. He went to Elphinstone in the morning and he always told me this story. When he reached Elphinstone in Mumbai, he was so dejected because he was lost. For the previous 15 years, he had grown up in the shadow and the affection of his grand uncle, of his brothers and sisters. He took the night mail from Mumbai back to Pune and said, I can't go to Mumbai, I can never study in Mumbai. I have to be close to my family. He came at 7 o'clock when all the sisters were having their morning tea. And the sisters told him, if Baba Sahib sees you, he'll beat you with a rod. So they all took him from the back door of the house, sent him back to the station, and he went back to Elphinstone, never to come back again, and never to turn back again. He could not do his civil services examination because the Second World War had broken out. And then he devoted himself to a career in the law. The other day I was tidying up his papers at home. I was not able to touch his papers quite honestly. For 2 years I let his papers be as they are. But then I said, you have to do some difficult things in life, so I started tidying up his papers. And I found a telegram which his father had sent to him when he passed his law examination first in the university, as Harsha just mentioned. And the then Bombay University comprised of Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka and parts of Sindh. And the telegram by his father said, congratulations my boy for topping the university, but always remember the credit goes to Baba Sahib. When he began his practice in the Bombay High Court, he was a young man without recommendation, he was a young man without a godfather. But he was tremendously blessed to appear in the Chagla court. And he tremendously profited by the learning, by the wisdom, by the experience, by the encouragement shown by Chief Justice Chagla, by Justice Gajendra Gadkar. Stalwarts who had a sense of vision, the true worth of their lives and the true worth of a life of a judge is not merely in terms of the number of cases which we dispose of, not merely in terms of the quality of the judgments that we write, but in terms of the life which we dedicate to institution building. And the institutional building process was brought about by stalwarts like Justice Chagla, Justice Gajendra Gadkar, Justice Tendolkar. And my father would, in the evenings of his life, regale us in the family with stories of how Chagla and Gajendra Gadkar would encourage them to do better. He would tell us of stories when, on the appellate side of the Bombay High Court, Mr. Daftari, Mr. Setalwad, Mr. Gulabai Desai would come to the appellate side, which was then not rated as high as the original side. And they would come and sit down and say, I have come to the house of an expert. Now please tell me an answer to a vexed civil problem. Nanavati's case was truly one of his high points in the career and ultimately which led him to become a judge of Bombay High Court. But my father's life, my father as a human being, was not complete and could never have been complete without my mother. She was the person who lived with him in a one-room tenement in a chawl in Dadar in Mumbai. She would take the family clothes for washing at the common tap. She would wash the clothes of whoever came to stay with them. Then they shifted to a one-room paying guest accommodation in Hindu colony. My mother was a disciple of Kishori Amunkar, and together they shared a great love for music. They would sing duets. Until the last day of his life, he would sing a beautiful duet by Sudhir Phadke, my sister is here. He would sing a beautiful duet called Shukratara with my sister, which was unmatched in its subtlety and style. The jacket of the first album sung by Kishori Amunkar has been written by my father. When he was called to the Supreme Court of India, believe me, he was inclined to say no, because he believed at that time that nothing would be greater for him than to occupy the chair of the Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court, which he was to become in the very next month. And my mother had some fear about how the children would behave in Delhi. She had some fears which were probably genuine, some fears which were not genuine. But they went to Delhi and he became the 13th judge in Keshwanand Bharati. In Keshwanand Bharati, he formed part of a minority. But his views, his principles were too great for him to merely flow with the winds of time. He stood in the minority because he genuinely believed that when you trust in a democracy, the legislature, you must trust the legislature in its entirety, subject to the power of judicial review. He delivered the judgment in the Prime Minister's election case soon thereafter, striking down the 39th Constitutional Amendment. So one thing which I may say was, despite the fact that he was a great thinker and intellectual, he was never rigid in his views. As a father, he was never rigid enough to realize that I was wrong. Later on in his life, he started telling him what to do, if only to protect him. And he would always say, I was wrong, I do what you say. But that aspect of his life emerged when he wrote the judgment in Minerva Mills. In Minerva Mills, he realized the limitations of his own judgment in Keshwanand Bharati, and then expounded upon how the principle of rights jurisprudence in India must be furthered, if only to protect basic human rights. I was by his side when he wrote Keshwanand Bharati. I was all of 13 years of age. And you would be surprised, every word in the judgment of Keshwanand Bharati was written in hand, in pencil. He wrote the entire judgment in hand. Judgment after judgment would he write in his own hand. In Olga Terrace, he wrote that even the pavement dwellers of Mumbai have a right to life, a right to livelihood. And he wrote that because he sincerely believed in that. But criminal law was truly unto his heart. He always joked with me and said, how is it that a criminal lawyer like me had occasion to write all these constitutional judgments? He was so humble. And he would then say it was a quirk of fate, He would say it's a quirk of fate. But it was not a quirk of fate, it was really a call of destiny. So often am I told by my colleagues on the bench when they read his judgment on anticipatory bail in Gulbakh Singh's case. The other day, I was sitting in my chambers at 2:45 in the Bombay High Court, when there was a knock on the door and my secretary told me that a very senior member of the bar wants to come in. So I said, please let me in. He said, sir, I've come to you for a very interesting reason. I was reading out your father's judgment in Mithu's case, where he struck down in Bangalore and Pune. His sister now is 96, and we are very grateful that our cousins have come here. He encouraged young lawyers at the bar. He had this unique ability to memorize names of lawyers. And so many distinguished members of the bench have told me that it was amazing that a young lawyer from Rajasthan who had just come to set up practice a month ago would mention in the Chief Justice's court, and he would say, yes, Mr. So-and-so. And that was an act of recognition for the Chief Justice of India to mention even the youngest lawyer. There was a young lawyer whom I met in Bangalore the other day when I went for a seminar, and who said, and I knew this, he began a pen pal correspondence with my father when my father was a judge of the Supreme Court of India. And my father would write copious letters even as the Chief Justice to this young lawyer who is now a very distinguished member of the Karnataka Bar, Mr. Sudhesh Pai. That correspondence led Mr. Sudhesh Pai to become a lawyer and then a distinguished constitutional lawyer. Writing letters was a passion for my father. Not a single letter remained unanswered. Every single letter was answered. He was a friend to the children. He was a friend to my sister. He was a friend to me. He lived by example. He didn't live by decree. As a judge, I don't think he lived by decree either. He lived by his own example. His home in the Chief Justice's house used to be full of young children. One of the perquisites of office is that you get a large number of staff quarters. We had 18 of them and 5 freshmen and Mark. So on an average, there were 18 times 2 or 18 times 3, there were about 50 odd children in that complex. Every Thursday evening, all the children would come and watch Chaya Geet or Chitrahar as we called it. About 2 months back when I was in Singapore, a very senior diplomat walked up to me and said, "Sir," he said, "I was a member of the diplomatic corps of my country in America, in India, in 1983, and when I happened to come and meet your father for an invitation." And he said, "I had a very interesting story which I must tell you. I never thought I'd meet you." He said, "I came to meet your father, who was then the Chief Justice of India, at about 8:30 in the evening. And I was most surprised at the sight of what I saw. There were about 50 children sitting in the drawing room, watching television, black and white television. And he says, here he was, entertaining a foreign guest, because nothing was as important to him that the children of his servants and personal staff should watch their Chayagit that particular evening." He was full of life, full of laughter. He was not really a very serious man when he sat down with his friends and family. You know, all of you travel by air, and there is a little board which says, "Baithe hue kursi pe peti bande rakhiye." That's what it is. Fasten your seat belt when you are seated. My father had coined a musical note to "Baithe hue kursi pe peti bande rakhiye." And whenever we got into the airplane, I was probably last about 45 as a judge when I sat in an aircraft with him, and he said, "Let us sing that together." And he would begin that song by saying, "Tatya, baithe hue kursi pe peti bande rakhiye." So full of life and laughter was he. In the years of twilight, he never left my mother's hand. He never wanted my mother to carry a walking stick, even as she was not able to walk. He was her walking stick. He would hold her by the hand, take her to the Cricket Club of India every evening, and make sure that she had to sit there and they would not walk around anymore because neither of them could walk. But he would sit there and they would have a little bit of fresh air. If I took a round at the CCI, he would walk up to me, hobbling across and say, "This round was 6 minutes and not 5 minutes." So deeply involved was he with his family. At the end of a life well lived, you wonder, how do you sum up that life? I thought I would just think about him and share a few thoughts, some feelings, some ideas, not as a judge, but as a very grateful son. His life was a life marked by restraint. His life was a life marked by humility. And his life was a life which was marked by ethical living. All judges do face challenges in their lives. Judges do face temptations in their life. Judges do face some grave temptations in their life. But at the end of it all, the reason why I always hold up my head high is not so much because he was a great judge, not so much because he was a great father, which he was, but because of the fact that I know how difficult it is to hold your head high as a judge and live despite temptation on the path of rightful will. And I think that's one legacy which he has left to us as the family. Just a week before he passed away, he told me that a very senior member of the bar walked up to him in the aircraft and said, "Well, sir, let me tell you about it." And he said, "Look, after having lived your life so fully, what better tribute can you have that you're not forgotten almost 23 years after you have laid down office?" And that was one of the greatest satisfactions that he ever had, that he was not forgotten. And I must thank each one of you here personally who did not forget him in the years of oblivion when he had laid down office, because that was his greatest satisfaction, that he was not forgotten. And perhaps, I'm sure you would have been very happy to know that he was not forgotten. He never wrote an autobiography. I was very keen that he should write an autobiography. There's a little biography called the Chandrchud Reader, which does not really do great service to him, but which I hope to improve upon very shortly. He didn't really write an autobiography. There was a reason for it. He thought, I believe, that if you have to write an autobiography, you have to be brutally honest. possibly he felt that if he had to be brutally honest, he would be hurting some people who are best left to lead their life in happiness like him. Was that good? Was that not good? It's for posterity. But that was all about him. A very kind man, a kind human being, an humble human being who walked with kings, with prime ministers, with chief justices from across the world, but whose greatest joy in life was